All right, today we are diving headfirst into one of the most famously depressing novels ever written, Thomas Hardy's Jude the Obscure. I mean, this book has a reputation. It absolutely scandalized readers back in the day and is known for being just relentlessly tragic. So you have to ask, why are we still talking about it more than a century later? That right there, that is the big question we're tackling. When this thing was published in 1895, people were furious. They called it grim, pessimistic, even immoral. And yet, it has this incredible staying power. So why? What is it about this story of complete and utter defeat that makes it so important and, so surprisingly modern?
Okay, let's approach this like a couple of literary detectives on a case. Because the clues to this novel's real power, they aren't buried somewhere deep. They're actually hidden in plain sight, right at the very beginning of the book. We're going to follow these clues to crack the case of why Jude the Obscure matters so much.
So first up, the facts of the case. Our main guy is Jude Foley. He's a stonemason, but he has these huge dreams of becoming a scholar at the university in Christminster. But his whole life is just one brutal collision with reality after another. His ambitions get shut down, his relationships completely crumble, and he just gets ground down by the rigid, suffocating social rules of Victorian England. It is, and there's no way around it, an absolutely heartbreaking story.
And that brings us to our first major clue. To really get what Hardy's doing here, what his big critique of society is, he basically gives us a key on page 1, an epigraph from the Bible. Now, this isn't just some fancy literary decoration, it's the lens he wants us to see Jude's entire life through.
And here it is, the letter killeth, but the spirit giveth life. Now, in its original context, this is all about the old, rigid laws of the past versus a new spirit of freedom. And Hardy just grabs that idea and turns it into this powerful weapon to use against his own society. This quote, "This is our Exhibit A." Hardy's entire novel is built on this one massive conflict. On one side, you've got the letter. That's all the rigid, unbending rules, the institutions, the laws, the traditions. And on the other side, you've got the spirit. That's the messy, vibrant, authentic, real desires of a person. The whole book is just a brutal battle between these two forces.
And Hardy shows us exactly how the letter killeth by taking aim at 3 huge pillars of Victorian society. First, the university. Jude's dream of Christminster is destroyed by these polite rejection letters. It's basically a closed club for the rich, not for some working-class guy. Then there's the church, which won't let him in because of his background. And finally, marriage, which he paints as this legal trap that just suffocates any real love for both Jude and his cousin, Sue. Each one of these institutions is like a brick wall built out of the letter.
The most horrifying result of this war between the letter and the spirit. It's laid bare in the book's most infamous, devastating moment. Jude's young son, feeling like they're just a burden in a world with no place for them, kills himself and his siblings. And the note he leaves behind, done because we are too many, it's the ultimate cry of the human spirit being literally suffocated to death by the unyielding letter of a society that has no room for them. It's just brutal.
But here's the thing, society isn't the only bad guy in this story. Jude's tragedy also comes from inside himself. So let's move on to our second clue, another epigraph from the start of the book. This one shifts our focus away from the external world and onto the powerful and often self-destructive nature of human desire.
Now, when you first read this quote from the book of Esdras, it sounds a little old-fashioned, right? Maybe even a bit misogynistic, like it's blaming women for men's problems. But Hardy is way, way too smart for that. He's using this ironically. He's digging at something much deeper, the chaotic, all-consuming, and sometimes self-destructive nature of passion itself.
You see, the 2 main women in Jude's life, Arabella and Sue, they aren't just simple temptresses. Not at all. They're more like the 2 halves of Jude's own soul. Arabella represents the pull of the physical, the sensual, the earthly part of him. And Sue? She represents the pull of the ideal, the intellectual, the spiritual side. He isn't torn apart by them, he's torn apart by his own conflicting desires for both of those things at once.
Okay, to really get a grip on this idea of self-consuming passion, we're going to take a quick detour into Hindu mythology. Stick with me on this, because the story of a demon named Bhasmasur is a shockingly perfect metaphor for what's going on inside Jude's head.
So, the myth goes like this. This demon, Bhasmasur, gets this incredible power. He can turn anyone to ash just by touching their head. Awesome, right? But he's so blinded by his own desire and arrogance that he decides to test his new power on the very God who gave it to him.
Well, in the end, he gets tricked into touching his own head, and poof, he destroys himself with his own gift.
And that right there is the perfect picture of Jude's internal tragedy. His passion for knowledge, for love, for a different kind of life, that is his greatest superpower. But in a world that shuts him down at every turn, that powerful passion has nowhere to go. So it turns inward. It becomes unchecked, self-consuming, and just like Basmaçar, Jude is ultimately destroyed by the very thing that makes him who he is.
So we've got our two main clues on the table: a society whose rules are designed to kill the human spirit, and a desire so powerful it ends up destroying itself. So what's the verdict? What does our investigation tell us? Well, it tells us that Jude the Obscure isn't just a critique of Victorian England. It's actually a shockingly early portrait of the modern individual.
What on earth does that mean? It means the book was asking the great philosophical questions of the 20th century before the 20th century even really got going. Jude is a brand new kind of hero. He's someone searching for meaning, for purpose, for an identity in a universe that seems to be completely, totally indifferent to his struggle.
I mean, look at this. The connection is crystal clear. Jude's journey lines up almost perfectly with the big ideas from major existentialist thinkers who would come decades later. He's like one of Kierkegaard's heroes, always reaching for something higher but getting crushed by the real world. He's like Camus's absurd man, who knows his struggle against the meaningless universe is probably hopeless, but he struggles anyway. And he embodies Sartre's idea of being condemned to be free, doomed to search for meaning in a world that just won't give him any.
So this is really the heart of it. Long before it was a formal philosophy, Hardy was writing about proto-existentialism, that deeply human and often really painful search for meaning in a world that offers zero easy answers. That, in a nutshell, is Jude's story.
And all of this brings us to our final conclusion, why this really sad 19th century novel feels so incredibly prophetic and honestly, so relevant to us right now. It's not just some historical artifact, it's a mirror.
You know, the very thing that made Victorian readers so angry, the book's bleakness, the fact that there's no happy ending, no neat moral lesson, that's exactly what gives it its modern power. Hardy refuses to give us any comfort. He just shows us the world as he sees it, a place where good intentions and big dreams can often lead to total ruin. And that honesty, that's what still hits so hard today.
In the end, this novel still matters, because Jude's anxieties feel like our anxieties. It totally captures that modern sense of alienation, of feeling like an outsider. It's all about the struggle to be your true, authentic self in a world that's always trying to shove you into a box. It lives in that constant tension between what we deeply desire and the rules we're supposed to live by. And more than anything, it forces us to walk that really fragile line between hope and despair that, let's be honest, defines so much of being human.
And so Hardy leaves us with his big question, but he aims it right at us. He shows us a world where rigid rules and unchecked passion lead to tragedy. So the challenge he leaves for us, all these years later, is to figure out, in our own lives, which are filled with rules and ambitions, how do we protect that vital, life-giving spirit? How do we keep the letter from killing us? It's a question that feels just as urgent today as it did back in 1895.